we'll get started. We could please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And today is May 19th, 2025, and this is a special meeting of the Milford Board of Education, mainly to discuss and finalize our long-range facilities planning draft concepts. So we're on our own tonight, board members, and we're just picking up, roll call, Ms. Griffin.
Megan Doyle.
Here.
Scott Furmender. Tracy Irby. Here. Tom Koba.
Here.
Lauren Mahler. Here. Adam Scobie.
Here.
I'm sorry, Christina Preet. Adam Scobie.
Still
Mike
here.
Smith.
Here.
Cindy Wolf Boynton.
Here.
And Susan Glennon.
Here.
9 members present.
Thank you. And Mr. Smith is virtual this evening. So board members, we're picking up from where we left off in March. At our last meeting, we reviewed information on the community conversation that we had, and we discussed just some general concepts. So just to open up, we've spent over a year and a half reviewing various pieces of data and information. We've looked at the condition of our buildings, projections on enrollment and building capacity, community survey and focus group responses, 2 community conversations, and other opportunities for public comment at our meetings. We've heard from an established architect who has managed numerous projects of this nature, who advised we should develop a concept first and then seek a planning team to flesh out possibilities and options, including the viability of potential sites, which is to be determined. I think we've established that we're operating on the premise that there is some land for new buildings, and that will be left to the next phase to explore. We've also agreed we're not talking about any specific schools at this time. We are just talking conceptually, and that once we establish our concepts, we'll put out a request for proposals to bring on an expert, as I just mentioned. I think what we've seen from all of this review, which we seem to agree on at the last couple of meetings, is that the status quo is not okay. People are okay with change and consolidation if done with planning and intention. Parents want more opportunities for their children. Parents want parity amongst schools. Our buildings are old, and the need to begin replacing them is understood, and there is interest in one high school. With that, we've talked about different tracks, 1, 2, 3, for one high school, and then we had some other conversations about if we need 2 high schools. We are the decision makers, and it's up to us to take all of this information and develop what we think is the best concepts to move forward with. As I mentioned at the last meeting, I think Ms. Preet, Ms. Wolf-Boynton, and I did discuss next steps, which included an agreement on a draft framework, holding a public hearing, and then a formal agreement and discussion on an RFP. So there's 2 more meetings we have planned after this for May 27th and June 2nd. And it did seem when we left off that there was general agreement for one high school, which I think comes with the understanding that the 2 current high schools would become the middle schools. We've invested a lot in those high school buildings, too much so to give them up. And given us, the 3 of us did think it made sense to try to narrow the concepts to a preferred plan and a contingency plan, which is what we want to talk about tonight, rather than adding to the cost with 2 full concepts. That way if the expert team concludes that one high school isn't viable, then they would then evaluate the other option rather than evaluating 2 or even 3 options from the start, which would help contain the cost of the project. So I'll let Ms. Preet and Ms. Wolf-Boynton weigh in for themselves, and then we can talk about this a little. I think, the goal for tonight is to formally adopt a draft or draft concepts that we'll bring forward to the public hearing, which will be next week. Ms. Preet, did I encapsulate what we discussed?
I think so. I do have one thing to add. I think
in the middle of our pause, and tonight, we had a presentation on March 31st of middle school programming. And I think that was very enlightening to us in terms of 3 physical buildings, regardless of the school, the location, 3 physical for those 6th, 7th, and 8th graders is too much. I think we gathered because it's spreading resources thinly, whereas we could offer more programming if it were in 2 locations, whatever they may be, and we could get a greater number of students in those 2 facilities who can engage in the program that we want to take forward. So I think that's kind of come to light because of that presentation on the 31st.
Anything to add?
Not particularly. I mean, I agree certainly with what both of you have said. I think that the public hearing coming up next week will be a really important part of the process. I think that the public has shown such a commitment and has so very thoughtfully and authentically brought ideas to the table, that reaching out to them one more time, at least one more time, but formally at this hearing, is an important step. And I think that, you know, we made it very clear as a board that the idea of whatever concepts that we're gonna take on are going to be thoughtful and intentional. I think our decisions with the budget really reflected our commitment to doing things right, and certainly doing things in the best interest of our schools. So, no, I'm just excited to move forward.
Thank you. Open the floor to any other discussions, conversations. Just kind of weighing in on where we've been, how we've gotten here. Anything anybody wants to share? Ms. Doyle?
Thank you. I agree with Ms. Preet regarding the presentation. I think that was very helpful for us to go, and I think we can think about the opportunity that exists if that occurs. If we happen to, I agree with the one high school, I think it provides us a lot of opportunities in the future of what we can provide for our students. And we've had many discussions about how this is not going to happen overnight. We are talking about a decades-long process that will be occurring here. And so I think I agree with the 2 high schools becoming the middle school in the future, and I think what's the benefit of that is that they will have athletic fields, they will have mechanic studios, they will have all of these kind of facilities that we have been planning for career pathways that we can then transition to the middle school level. And because we've been having a long discussion about how we can't offer programming, and because of budgetary restraints. Well, we already have the built-in infrastructure there, and we are currently in the process of updating the infrastructure at law, so that by the time these projects, or we come to the fruition of we may be making that transition, we will have an opportunity to provide a lot more for our middle school students in larger buildings, which does provide opportunities and other discussions that will need to be made. However, I think I'm okay with that plan moving forward.
Mr. Kobat?
I'm in general agreement also, particularly from the middle school standpoint and the way the high school's presented. For everything everybody else said, you're getting economies of scale with respect to administration and maintenance and things of that nature on top of it in the buildings. And then you've got all the flexibility with programming. You can respond better to fluctuating enrollments with a larger footprint. And, you know, I just think in general, and it provides all the opportunities that we're looking for our students also.
Ms. Mahler?
So I completely agree on the idea of the programming component that we talked about. Heard the same presentation, heard the same conversation about what we can and can't offer here and there, and we just made a lot of forced cuts to some different things that changed a little bit of the shape of what we can offer next year. So we all are in agreement that we want to offer more, and that we want to be able to continue expanding on that and providing that expansive set of opportunities flexible to the needs that we see for our kids going into the future. That we don't want to lock them into, this is all you can take now, regardless of how much money we're allowed to spend. This is all you can have access to right now because this is what our physical infrastructure limits us to. So there is absolute agreement that that needs to change, that footprint doesn't work. Not only is that infrastructure limiting, it is also incredibly old, to the point where it becomes limiting in and of itself for the reasons that we all know things were built 50, 60, 70 years ago and they're not built that way now. So I think that part is in agreement. The one place where I'm gonna differ is that where we are in the process right now and the feedback that we've gotten, not only from the community, but also from the various conversations and data that we've received here, I'm not at a point where I am prepared to commit to a single scenario with one high school that has a backup contingency option of a different footprint, of a different shape. For me, it doesn't make sense to make that choice now when we don't have any of the actual information from the experts on the ground who would conduct the specific detailed level of work and exploration that is necessary to determine what it would cost to get to that point. And I understand we're in a very notional place right now. That's the idea of the concept. We're not saying this is what everything will look like, therefore we will barrel forward. That's not what this is. But I also think that, for me, the amount of information that we have, and we've discussed this before, so it's not a surprise. We have heard that from a lot of people, that there is a gigantic open-ended question around cost. And I think given the budget conversation that we just went through, given the directions and the pushing and the pulling that we've gotten from so many places and the signs that we've been given going down the road, I think that committing to something in any shape, in any format of a building structure at this time without knowing and being able to compare the full costs of the two options, rather than viewing one as the intent and the other as the backup, I think the two should be reviewed at the same time so that the actual comparison can be made from a cost perspective. And we just don't have that level of detail because we're not at the point in the process where it's been able to get collected and analyzed by the folks who do that. So for me, the single scenario, regardless of what it looks like, one high school, two middle school, whatever it is, having one with a backup, to me, doesn't work right now. To me, I still think there should be two that we pursue in parallel so that we can actually make a determination at the point in time in the future when we have a full range of information about the cost and the details and the specifics around both of them. That's my take.
Mr. Scobie?
I was thinking something similar. I agree with what everyone's saying about the programming and the economies of scale and everything that's said, but I also think that if we push a plan forward with a backup, then if that original plan goes through, we'll never know if that backup could have also worked in its own way. So I was thinking the same, we should try to run plans parallel to each other so we can actually compare apples to apples.
So that's, I understand what each of you are saying. I think it's a given that we're gonna spend a lot of money any way you look at it. I mean, this is gonna be costly. And I think looking, at the dollars today is almost, I don't wanna say irrelevant, but, what we might get out of this in, in 9 months, when it actually comes to fruition down the road, 10 years, the cost is gonna be different anyway. I think for me, at this point, it's a philosophical decision and more philosophy. What is it that we think we want the public school system to look like in 10 years? So it's not a question of, if we're all in agreement that we want to move towards one high school, then why would we need to look at another plan that might work as well if what we want is one high school, if that's what we want to advocate for?
I'm not sure we're all in agreement on that yet.
I think most of us are. I mean, in
Okay,
the
but you
end,
said all, so I wanna be clear. I
Well,
don't think all of us are in agreement that one high school is the best option, and that's not what I heard in an all in agreement perspective from the community either. I agree that I was very surprised at how many people were open to that idea, because I
Right.
think a lot of us came in not expecting that. And I like the openness and the thoughtfulness that everyone has approached that, with which everyone has approached that question.
Mhm.
But I don't think that there has been an overwhelming, obvious answer that has made me at least say, community wants one high school, I think they're right, let's go. I think it is very much in a, we are open to that, so therefore it's worth this parallel track pursuit. That's the conclusion that I have drawn from what I have heard from the same conversations.
I think the data that we've seen has been very clear straight through that it's pretty much, seems to be 50-50. I mean, there's no clear either
Right,
one way or the other.
which is why taking one off the table or putting it into a secondary position doesn't seem to make sense, because there's not really a secondary position amongst preferences within the community.
Well,
So to
some-
me, it speaks to parallel.
At some point, we have to move it forward. I mean, we're the decision makers.
Right.
Ms. Doyle?
See, I think we are in the 2-2 scenario right now. We have 2 high schools split between the community where we cannot offer any new programming for the foreseeable future in my mind because of budget cuts, by constraints of cost. And we will have 2 schools that need to be replaced at some time in the future, is how I see it. And so I don't think with the footprints that we have currently at either school, can we dream big? Can we have opportunities of music, of theater, of arts, which are all lacking across all the schools? Those are not opportunities that can ever exist. And I'm of the opinion that cost is like secondary to everything, because we don't know what's happening we don't know what's happening tomorrow, but we don't even know what's gonna happen in 5 to 10 years regarding cost of where this is. And I think it's our role to make the big decision, to make the hard decision. Because it isn't an end of the day, because we could come back in 9 months and there is no space that exists. So we then have to go through the second process. I'm not, logistically, I think it would be very expensive for us to consider building 2 brand-new high schools where we're not gonna have parity between the schools. And I don't know if the appetite of the community is to spend $600 million versus $350 million. I don't know what the appetite is, and because there are also elementary schools that need to be addressed and middle schools, and a cycle of where we're going.
Ms. Boynton?
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said, and, you know, I was thinking today about my own evolution of thought. I'm sorry.
You meaning whom? With everything you said, so I'm not sure who you mean.
Ms. Doyle, everything that Ms. Doyle said. And, you know, I was thinking today and reminded when she was speaking about how early in this process I kept saying, well, where are the experts, right? What do the experts have to say? And, you know, it took me a while to kind of buy into this whole idea that this is our responsibility. Like we, and in fact, Ms. Doyle, I think you very eloquently said at one point, you know, we are the experts. We're the ones who have to make the decision. And it's kind of, it's interesting because we're making a decision about a vision that we have for the Milford Public School System that we honestly don't even know is ever gonna happen. But we have to have a path to move forward with, and you know, based on all of the information that we have been given thus far, which I believe is really all the information that we can get to this point. Ms. Mahler, when you were speaking, I totally agree with what you're saying, you know, but it's my understanding that at this point in the process, that we couldn't necessarily get that information, that level of detail, unless we had those 2 RFPs going out concurrently. And I do truly believe that from the feedback that we've received, and everything that's been put together, that 1, 2, 6 option that we've talked about is really the best for the city. But I also, right now, if there is a majority of members who believe in that, in the budget constraints that we're under right now, like $250,000 seems almost an obscene amount of money to have to pay. But making it $500,000 at one time, I don't know how we could do that.
Ms. Preet?
I wish we could fast forward to answer the million-dollar question, which is there land, right? And that would be how we get there in the first place. But I also think back to when Mr. Bradbury spoke about the buildings themselves, and so I guess the question on the table is whether we go towards one, and then if that's not feasible because there is no land to build one new, then we, remember the chart where it goes with the arrow, right?
Yeah.
And then we kind of go back and says, okay, there's no land, and then we kind of have to decide what to do then. Versus the other suggestion that's now on the table as far as pursue 2 tracks. All right, is that what I'm hearing? 2 tracks, one being that first I just mentioned, and the second being one, keep the 2.
I'm not even sure what the second would be.
Yeah, that's what I
so-
want, Mary, clarification, and I don't know if Mr. Brennan wants to weigh in on, is this even feasible to, we just want an RFP to see if there's land, you know, because that's gonna answer so much for us, I believe, so, I don't know.
I think, we've been operating on the premise that there is land, the
Okay.
question, and we don't talk about that publicly for obvious reasons,
Mhm,
we've
mhm.
talked about that, but, the question more is there viable land?
Mhm.
And I think, which, I guess, the whole thought, the premise was that we would, if there's land, we're gonna move forward with, that's the option we would move forward with. If there's not land, then we revert back to the contingency plan, I'm gonna call it. Mr. Brennan?
Yes, so just to go back to Ms. Preet's question there, so scope of services, we could make it as specific as, is there land for that, and keep it very small, or we can engage in a larger scope of services.
Okay.
I think just to go back to a point from earlier, I wouldn't recommend that we go with 2 separate RFPs. I would recommend that however the board decides that we should move forward, that all that information should be into one RFP. Because having 2 separate RFPs, I'm having trouble seeing how that's gonna work in conjunction with each other. When you're getting those estimates, I think it's really gonna be one RFP that has what our desired look like,
Mhm.
whether it's an option A, option B, whether it's all just one option, whatever we come to a conclusion of. I think embedding that all in one RFP is the correct move for the next step forward. Makes sense.
Mr. Smith, do you wanna weigh in?
Well, I'm getting some of the audio, and now I'm getting feedback, so
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, it's all right.
We
I
can hear
appreciate
you
the
crystal
dialogue
clear.
discussion, and I'm listening.
Mr. Smith, can you hear us, though?
I can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah, I can
all right,
hear you.
great.
The microphone isn't picking up everything. It's probably like 80 to 90% of the audio I'm getting. So I'm missing a few of the words, but I'm trying to follow.
Okay.
I don't have anything to add at this moment.
All
I'm
right,
just listening to
okay.
the discussion.
Ms. Zerbe?
I think I like the one high school plan because it's just a bit more definitive, and then we can possibly move forward and give the city something new. And not, because even if you do the 2 high school plan, that's 1 high school at a time, more than likely, right? Not two high schools at once. So the 1 high school would serve the greater number, I would think.
And I never, to be totally honest, never would have thought I mean, I would argue about one high school with my kids 15 years ago because I was never on board with one high school. But as I've moved through this process and heard about the limitations of the current high schools, you know, things as basic as, you know, everyone not being able to charge their devices or not being able to have, you know, good Wi-Fi access because the buildings just were not built suited for that when they were built many decades ago. It makes me, it has made me realize that I think the infrastructure is limiting what kids can do. And I think that, it never even occurred to me that we would actually build two high schools. I think two new high schools, I think that's, I think it should be obvious that that's, you know, twice the cost of what one would be, and that's, I think that's very limiting. My assumption was that if we didn't move forward with one high school, we're stuck with the two that we have, and we need to make them work. Not that we would build new high schools. So I mean, I stick with my original preference is 1, 2, and 6, and I think I'm more than willing as a contingency plan to talk about remaining with 2, and then having, even if we have to go that route, having the firm look at 2 middle, 3 middle, whatever, you know, whatever we think, but as a backup plan. I just can't support paying for 2 full plans if the majority thinks that one high school is really the best direction to go in. It just doesn't make sense to me. That we pay for 2 plans unless the one high school piece can't move forward, and then we move on to the second. Then we wouldn't have paid for a full plan, because we'll know it early on in the process that one high school won't move forward. Then we revert back to this contingency plan. But if one high school is viable, if the majority of people think that that's what we should be doing, that's the best thing, then that's what we advocate for moving forward. Mr. Scobie?
So I'm just trying to balance this out in my head. If one of the ideas that was pitched is if we do switch to one high school, we would use 2 high schools as middle schools. Did I understand that correctly? I think this is just good. Okay. So in that case, couldn't we push forward an RFP that explores the idea of one high school with the cost of the land, renovating the 2 high schools to try to make them equal? Because if we do go with one high school, we'll need those 2 original high schools to now be up to par for the middle schools. If the land doesn't work out, then we now know the cost to fix up the 2 high schools. The only additional cost to what we should already be doing if we're planning on doing one high school, the 2 high schools being middle schools now, is it comes down to the 3 middle schools. So we'd only really need to add in the cost of seeing what it would take to improve upon the 3 middle schools if we were going to keep them.
I missed you. I lost track of where you were going with.
Yeah, I was lost track a little bit.
So
myself
one
when I
high
explained
school.
it. So if we, I mean, explore the idea of one high school, the land and the cost. If that doesn't work out, or let's say that does work out, then we're moving on to the next phase of this, of trying to have the middle schools move into the high schools. Well, if we're going to do that, I assume we want parity amongst the 2 new high schools. So we would be meeting to improve upon the 2 high schools. So the RFP that's moves forward, we should explore the one high school with the land issue. We should explore how much it would cost to renovate the 2 high schools. And that, again, it works with that 1-2-6 plan. But if we went with let's just say a 2-3-6 plan, well, we're already exploring the cost of the 2 high schools to fit the 1-2-6 plan. The only difference is if we did the 2-3-6 plan, is we should be exploring the cost of the 3 middle schools. So I don't think it's going to add, I mean, not that I know anything about surveying or anything like that, but the only real difference between the 2 is also exploring the cost of the middle schools.
Well, I think the high school, the current high school piece has middle schools. I think there's different needs for a middle school and a high school, so I think that looks very different in terms of what those costs would be. So I don't think you can.
Apples to apples.
I don't think that would be apples to apples. I think there's a lot of differences. And I think, you know, we need the expert to look at the plan as a whole and say, you know, this is what they would suggest in terms of high school piece, middle school piece, and elementary piece is there too. So I mean, who knows what they might suggest for the elementary piece in terms of getting some new elementary buildings as well. That's kind of where, you know, they need to flesh out the specifics of whatever concept we give them, concept or concepts. I just, you know, for me, it boils down to the leveraging the operational costs effectiveness of consolidation, and how that will enable us to explore the more opportunities for their kids that parents have asked for. And it will also give us a way to do our best to create parity amongst the schools. I mean, it might not be possible to do it 100%, or, you know, but it's gonna take a long time, and we're talking at least 10 years here, so,
Mr. Wren, could you kind of follow up with the difference between renovating the high schools to keep them as high schools versus renovating them to become middle schools? Like, do you have an idea of what that might look like in comparison?
So I do agree with Ms. Glenn's statement that the needs would be different. So I know you mentioned about bringing those up to par of what we would consider up to par would be for a high school. May look different than what it would be for middle schools, just based on programming. I think the benefit of that is that some of the visioning that we've talked about with middle schools now has some of those opportunities within those current building structures. But if you were looking at what it would take for those schools to be shifted to a middle school, I think that elements of that could certainly be involved in this planning piece. I think the engineers and experts could certainly take a look at that, but it wouldn't be the same comparison that we've done for what we've looked at with those current buildings. So the way we've looked at those current buildings, when we've done some of the Bureau Veritas reports, were based on what our current high school programming is. So this reports that we have from the Bureau Veritas would shift because programmatically the needs are different at the middle school level. So I think that is an accurate statement.
and we do have the Bureau Veritas
We do.
reports that
We
give
do.
us
Based on
baseline financial information.
baseline financial information over the next 20 years,
And we've had estimates on square footage for new buildings and things like that as well. Dr. Kutaya?
Thank you, Ms. Glennon. This conversation is reminding me of the second to last slide of Mr. Stein's presentation, and I have it up. I'm happy to send it to anyone here. But he has a timeline, and I remember the line with the arrow, loop-de-loop, became a long dialogue amongst this board. So I just want to bring that back to the front. And I will read to freshen our memories. The first box on the left says, establish your concepts. High school, 1 verse 2, middle school, 3 to 2, number of elementary. Then the next one is, the next step in the process takes about, give or take, 9 months, according to Mr. Stein. And that is site selection, commissioning a design firm to explore new site locations and evaluate the constraints and possibilities of the existing sites. And then the third box is ed specs, establish and project long-range educational programs. That's about 3 months. And then there's the loop-de-loop. And if I remember correctly, the loop around arrow from Mr. Stein was, well, if something goes wrong in that process, or if it results in a roadblock, then we go back to your concepts. So I bring that back as a reminder to this board that even from the experts, we heard that they will need, whether it's Mr. Stein's firm or not, some direction on how to spend the next few months. And certainly, we do believe it's gonna be months. So we don't wanna engage in that process and have to hit the loop-de-loop back again. We wanna make sure that they get clear direction from this board on what to work on.
Which will come, I mean, again, we're talking about drafts right now, so that clear direction would come after we make a formal determination on June 2nd, that would be after the public hearing.
So if I may, so just to be clear then, our goal tonight is to agree on or vote on a draft concept that will then be brought before the public hearing, that we will then formally vote on June 2nd.
Correct. Right.
In that process, do we have the ability to make changes between the public hearing and what we vote on the 2nd? Or are we locked in on voting on the 2nd on whatever we draft tonight? We just then do that vote with the input of the community? Or do we have the ability, based on that input, to make changes to what we vote on the 2nd?
Well, anybody can always make a change to a motion, so there's always the
So
option.
yes, we can make changes.
Yes.
Always the
Yes.
option to make amendments or changes. But, in the end, it boils down to what the majority thinks is the correct way to go.
We've been
Mr.
talking
Brent,
about.
Mr. Koba,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead.
We've been talking about a contingency. Do we know have we defined what that is? I've heard different things, so.
Well, my assumption, as we were wading through all the information and having our conversations all these months, was that the contingency would be to stick with 2 high schools.
Okay, so revert to,
And then there was
Doing what it
discussion,
takes.
and 6 elementary schools, everybody seems to be good with that. Then there was some flux about 2 or 3 middle schools at that point, and how that would look. Because at that point, we wouldn't be using the high schools.
right.
So, and I understand that might be something we want to leave open-ended to start with. But, I personally feel strongly that if the majority through our last 2 meetings, I was under the impression that pretty much everybody was on board with 1 high school. So if I assumed incorrectly, I'm sorry, but I think the majority was good with that. And we also, back in the end of February, saw that there were 7 people, we did a straw poll on middle school, so it was 7 preferred 2, thought that was the right option, and 3 thought that 3 was the right option at that point. So there was even a majority for that. And again, we're not talking about specific schools, so there shouldn't be any, except with the thinking that if we go to 1 high school, the 2 high schools will become middle schools. That's, we're not talking about any other specific schools, so I think that needs to be very clear. Mr. Brennan?
Yeah, I just had one quick point that I wanted that we have for our elementary schools. There may be a different proposal for location based upon their analysis. So when we're thinking of site surveying, I want to just kind of take us a step back and consider that as well. And I think that should be included in this RFP, that when they're looking at a land survey, land analysis of our city, that they're looking at it from all different levels so that we can think of how we're going to use that information to move us forward. If we do move to 6 schools, there may be some other shifts that need to occur, so we need to think about land across the city.
Right, but would you agree that the high school piece is the dominant piece because?
Absolutely. I just don't want to lose sight of that other part that we need to, in this RFP, consider.
I think your point is the RFP is a K-12 RFP.
Right,
Yeah.
correct, yes, that I understand that.
Perfect.
So just to clarify for my own self, saying out loud what you just said, when we're looking at the land use, we're looking at it for all 3 levels, potentially. So if we agree that in the RFP, we say we want 6 elementaries, go out and find the 6 optimal locations for elementaries, it may not be 6 existing schools that just get expanded. It may be a combination of existing infrastructure and buildings that we already have and new locations that then become new schools. And the same thing I would think would apply to both the middle and at high school level as well. I think one of the options for sure is is it even possible to do 1 high school? That, there's enough of an interest there to pursue it. But I think when we're looking at the balance to that, there's enough interest to pursue that, but I don't think the interest in that is so dominant that we're ready to put the other in a sub-contingency role, in my mind. That keeping the 2 high schools as a contingency doesn't mean we keep them as a contingency, we just get extra duct tape for next year and hope for the best. Not next year, that was the wrong terminology. it's not a build one new high school or keep what we have and don't do anything. I think the alternative is build one new high school or make our other 2 high schools the way they should be, rebuild them. I think that, we're beyond the, duct tape on the old Chevy model here, as Mr. Bradbury made very clear. So I think it's 2 new high schools versus 1 new high school. So when we're talking about it, that makes it more of an apples to apples concept, like Ms. Glenn was talking about, of conceptually, what do we want? 1 shiny new high school or 2 shiny new high schools, I think needs to be the balance here. It's not, don't touch anything, move on, status quo, hope the roof doesn't leak, versus a shiny new thing that's awesome. We have to make the other 2 that way as well. I think that's a misalignment of what those 2 pieces would look like, and I don't think, to me, the 1 versus 2, setting aside the middle school, and I think we're good on the elementary, but setting aside that middle school piece at the moment, conceptually, to me, there's not a strong enough pull for 1 versus 2 to put one of them in the primary and one of them in the contingency role.
Well, from what we have spent now, when did we do the first survey? In October? So we've spent all this time on many different occasions putting this out and have not inched, I don't think, maybe I'm hearing a little bit more acceptance for 1 high school, but I don't think there's ever gonna be a real clear distinction, 1 or 2 high schools from the public. I think it's gonna be fairly split, and I think it's gonna come down to the board having to decide.
As we're putting in the different pieces to the RFP, to what Mr. Brennan was saying, where we have to be clear what we are asking them to look at, but we don't need a full and complete K-12 RFP, K-12 RFP. Because the elementary piece is where it is, then is there a way to also include in that components, and Mr. Brennan, this is a little bit of a question of the 1 school land, is it viable, is that even an option that we're talking about, while making a part of the same RFP, what would the cost be to redo the 2 high schools the way they should be? So we can ask for anything.
You could.
So if we're looking at those 2 as a major decision point that is not, in my mind, yet at a decision point, can we have those 2 evaluated in a almost an isolated way for the first part of an RFP, before we get back to that little arrow that circles us back around?
Can you clarify the second part of that?
Yeah.
So build 1 high school, or what's the other one?
Take the 2 high schools now and
Renovate is new, probably.
either renovate as new or completely rebuild, looking at either.
So
We
you're
would choose
suggesting
one of them.
Note that we don't look at the elementary schools.
No, we do look at the elementary schools, but that piece is the same in option 1 and option 2, so we don't have to do it twice. We can just do it once.
So.
These are all sections of the RFP. The elementary section is what it is.
But the elementary piece is kind of dependent on what happens above it, to some degree, with the whole plan.
How is
Because-
it? I don't see that.
Because some of the, we might be reusing properties that we already have. So a expert who has done this before can design a process that might say, you do A, you do B, and you do C, and the elementary piece might be using swing space or something like that, so that what happens at that point depends on some of the other pieces. But the other pieces, I believe Mr. Stein said that if you're gonna build, there's no way to build those 2 new high schools on the sites that they already exist on, because there's no space to do that. So it's clearly finding property for 2 different schools, which, I think we're going in a totally different direction here than the direction, we've been trying to narrow our scope all these months, and now we're starting to go like this again. So that concerns me a little bit. But he was very clear that, the land that those schools are on is limited. That there really isn't even there's not a whole lot of way to even expand those schools to any great degree because of, Law has a lot of wetlands around it, Foreign has a lot of rock. Ms. Doyle?
So, 2 months ago, maybe now, it all runs together. having after attended the Wallingford event, Wallingford had a very long discussion about where they're going. At this point, they've decided, their board move to one high school. And this process apparently started in 2016, and they're no farther ahead, and they've done 0 investments. Maybe not 0, I don't wanna speak for them, but my impression from that conversation was they've made no movement at the middle school level or the elementary school level. So I'm very concerned that we are going to be in that position, that we have lose all credibility as a Board of Education if we don't make any decisions. I was also struck, they had, I thought, a fatal mistake. They never determined where the school was going. They're very similar to us because they have 2 high schools. And they took the decision to build a new high school on one of the properties, which didn't work for everyone across the district. There was a lot of issues, a lot of that, and then there was a lot of pushback from that. And so they are at this point where they have ed specs, invested and spent a lot of money on ed specs, and have no location for this school. Like, what are you gonna do? Build it in the sky? And so my takeaway from that was a very interesting comment, I thought, by the board chair. She's like, it's not my job to sell you on it. And I think it's our job to sell the community on this, is the vision of the future that we want for our community. And that's what our job is our job is to take all the information that we've sat here and gone through and sell you and sell. And I can sell a brand new high school that looks beautiful for a singular school. And it's our job to push back on the ideas, or to, not push back, but to listen and have a productive conversation about those issues. I heard worries about mental health regarding having one high school, worries about athletics, worries about opportunities, worried about losing in the crowds, and things like that, which are true, I think, at both schools, regardless of size. That still happens. What we can't do now is provide those extra resources because we're so budgeted constrained. So we might have a desire to have multiple more counselors in a school, but we don't have the resources to do that. But we might be able to do that if we have room in terms of that. I'm really hesitant of the idea of 2 high schools because it's not a change. The other large takeaway I took from the budget conversation and the long-range planning is that people are okay with change as long as the change is something that is good. And I want that for Milford. I want that to be the vision, is have a beautiful school or whatever it is. So I think that we have to make a decision, and people are gonna come along with it, and we have to say what is good about it. The last part is I went to Northeastern for undergrad, and they're talking about replacing the oldest ice pavilion in Boston. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, the oldest pavilion on ice and whatever in Boston. But you know what they did? They put out a beautiful building, beautiful ed specs. This is what's gonna happen in the future. We may be losing some sort of our history, but this is our opportunities that exist. And I think that's our role. So when it comes to the RFP, I'm fine with the 1 high school, the contingency if we have to have 2 high schools. I don't know if we can ever get to 2 new high schools. That's a legitimate question in my mind. And then we go to 1 high school, that flows down to the middle school, where they move into the high schools. We might get back that an elementary school should be built on a location of a middle school. It may be anywhere. It could be any of those things. I think that's not my expertise, that's the RFP. But I can build a vision.
The idea of building 2 new high schools never even crossed my mind because, that still brings us back to the whole premise and the whole, the things that we've been hearing, that parents want more opportunities for their kids, they want parity among schools. You can build 2 schools to be identical, but they're still not gonna always have parity because your class, because of your enrollment. Your enrollment is too small to always be able to support duplicating programs in 2 different schools. And we have heard that very clearly over the past several months, that, there's a class doesn't run at 1 high school because not enough kids signed up for it. And that upsets parents that, their child's class that he wanted to take was canceled because there weren't enough kids signed up for it. And yet the class is moving forward at the other high school because enough kids signed up. So the 2 new high schools is not gonna solve that problem. And you know, my hope is that we can, I mean, I'm gonna be optimistic and think that, you know, we are gonna find viable land that can be used for one high school, and that we will be able to move forward with that if that's the board's desire. Because for me, the crux of the discussion is about being able to do more for kids, and we need to consolidate and find economies of scale in order to do that. And I think, you know, and we have old buildings, so we wanna get some new buildings out of it, but that's what I thought this, you know, that's what I thought we've been discussing all of this time. Did you have something else to say? I wasn't sure if you were raising your hand.
No, it's just
Okay. Oh. So, Mr. Smith, you still have nothing to add? Just, I don't wanna leave you out there.
The audio's better, and I appreciate the discussion, and I do think that there's a lot that's been said, and I think that initially, I wasn't sure exactly where I'd be, but I think the idea of having that kind of if this, then that kind of contingency and really exploring the one high school, I was impressed with how many people came out of the community conversations and how much how ready the community seemed to have that conversation was exciting and refreshing, and looking forward to next week. And I'm not sure I can say it better than everybody said it, the challenges with every option we have ahead of us. So thank you.
Ms. Preet?
So, Mr. Brennan, when you were mentioning Bureau Veritas, so Joseph A. Foreign over the next 20 years as a total of $86 million in needs, and Jonathan Law is $77 million in needs, which is a total between the two high schools as they stand right now, $163 million.
Is that with the increased cost, the increased square footage?
Oh, with
that we were
the,
given?
oh, with the, that's a
Yeah,
good
that's not the
question.
vote.
So it's more than that,
It's more
yeah,
than
you're
that.
right, okay,
We asked
okay,
Dr. Champion to go back and reevaluate those
yep,
numbers
okay,
based on some of our current experiences that we're seeing right now
Yep.
with the cost that we're looking at the Beauty project, and
Yep,
so he's
you're right.
reflected those in some new updates.
okay. So, there's that to consider. Now, if we were to make the two existing high schools into two middle schools, that programming as we looked at it was gonna be for high school needs. Does anything change? Because essentially, if you have middle schoolers in those buildings, are we now able to not have to do as much, or are these numbers still gonna be these numbers regardless of the age of the kids in there?
Are those numbers that they've estimated? So I
Yeah.
think those numbers would change based on, like what we talked about a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
the programming needs
Mhm.
for our
Just the
middle school
program,
students, just the program.
Yeah,
So there will be some renovations that need to occur in certain places.
no matter what.
Like, the pool's still gonna go,
Right,
Yeah.
yep.
like, it's gonna go any day.
Yeah.
So that has to be renovated whether middle schools are in there or not.
Mhm.
I would imagine the culinary space wouldn't have to be industry standard,
Mhm.
because middle school culinary experience is different than a career prep. But things that are behind the wall, Ms. Preet, like
Yeah, correct.
plumbing, the electric, the power, shortage of outlets, bolstering up the Wi-Fi, or et cetera, that stuff exists no matter what.
Okay. Because then I was kind of considering if, just from a physical location of all, I'll just say the 8, the 3, and the 2 right now as it stands, if we do one new high school and we make Jonathan Law and Warren middle schools, and we're on 6 elementary, 8 plus 3 is 11, that frees up or makes available 5 existing properties. So we have to look into that consideration.
Well, that's for the expert to look
Exactly,
at, and
exactly.
who has done this before.
And just throughout all this whole night, I am also leaning towards the 1, 2, and 6. Is where I'm still netting out.
May I ask a question? It was asked a little bit earlier, but I think and maybe I'm the one that pulled us off, but we didn't, I don't think, land on a specific answer to it. If we go for the Plan A, Plan B contingency version, what specifically, because we do have to be specific in our RFP, what specifically is that contingency look like? What are we specifically asking for an analysis of in that contingency? If there is not A, i.e. if there is not a viable option for the one big new high school, and therefore we've built in our first little semi-arrow loop back to our contingency, we're just kind of shortcutting that process to get to and move ahead and keep going, which is fine. What does that next option look like? And that's a place that we haven't landed yet. Because if we can't do the one, then we have the two high schools. So assuming we can't do the one, puts us in looking at what this contingency or this other option is.
So, Mr. Brennan, oh, I'm sorry, were you done?
Nope, I was very close though, I promise. So that puts us in a place where we don't have one high school, we have two, because there's not the land for one. So from what you all were just saying, which is a little different from my understanding, we can't rebuild the two high schools. But we've already said we basically have to go into the walls and out because there is that much that has to be changed. So it's more than just a renovate to new. It's a lot more significant than that. But that, again, that's for the experts to figure out what needs to happen to those two as the contingency. What then is the rest of that plan? Obviously, the 6 elementaries stay the 6 elementaries, but we now have a different plot of land that we're looking at because of the shuffling around, as Ms. Preet was just saying, of the 11 potential current locations that now no longer only have to accommodate 6, now need to accommodate more than that. What is our, I think that was my 30-second warning. What is the contingency version of the footprint? Is it, do we agree that it is 2, 3, 6? Do people think it should be a 2, 2, 6? That's a little bit, I think, a question in front of us, or at least for me to get to a point of being potentially comfortable with the contingency idea. I need to know what that contingency looks like. And that to me is the most obvious place to start is the 2, 3, 6, where all of those become what they're supposed to be, not their current falling down versions.
I personally, at this point, I'm not seeing any scenario where I think we need 3 middle schools, but I'm willing to, I mean, I know that some people voiced some concerns about the pathways, and I'm willing, as a contingency plan, to leave that open-ended in terms of the RFP, in terms of looking at 2 or 3. But I did want to ask, Mr. Brennan, is it possible to, do you think it would be feasible, as a Plan B, if we were to say, for instance, okay, if Plan A, 1 high school doesn't work, we have to revert to 2 high schools. Give us your ideas of what that might look like.
We could certainly do that in the RFP, absolutely. And to your point, at the current 2 high schools they have right now, to utilize current functioning of what we have going on right now and construct a new high school on the same site, we certainly need an expert opinion on that, but I would be hard pressed to think that we have the land available to do such.
Yeah, I thought Mr. Stein had said that he did not feel that we did, but I might be wrong.
I believe so.
But,
Depending upon the size
Right.
and just the current acreage we have there right now, and I'm just going through my head of where that construction could even take place. It's
Like the whole site would have to shut down to be rebuilt, but we don't have the ability
space.
within our current footprint to do the swing space to put those
Not for
kids
high
somewhere
school.
else at the high school level
Yeah.
for that construction. Yeah,
I mean, that would be, it's just like so expansive to even think about, trying to do that.
to your
Yes.
point, Ms. Glennon, that could certainly be included in there from an expert analysis of the looking.
So 2 brand-new high schools would be a
No, I
contingency?
would, personally, I would want them to say to us, this would be my suggestion, if you're gonna stay with 2 high schools,
Okay,
because you can't go to 1, then this is what we would suggest you do.
okay.
that would be, I mean, I think leaving it up to the people that do this for a living.
And I think it's important in that contingency to leave the 3 middle schools on the table at that point, because there is so much else open and unknown. I think taking that off the table is definitely premature at this point for that Plan B option.
I would be able to support that as a Plan B option,
For 3 middle schools.
2 or 3.
3.
So to look at both.
Okay. I'm not.
I'm leaning to 2, but I
Yeah,
would be willing to
yeah.
leave it open to talk about
And just
3.
that presentation on March 31st really
Yep.
did kind of fire.
I'm with you on that.
Keep your fingers
absolutely.
super crossed then for the one.
Well, that's
Giant
what I
fun
said a
plan.
little while ago, that I'm gonna be optimistic that we will be able to find some land and that one high school will be a real possibility.
So, sorry, we're also talking, so if you said this, pardon me. So if, I have 2 questions that are not related. One, if not one high school, then what do they recommend? So that still leaves us with the renovation of an old building. So you still got stuff behind the walls kind of stuff. So we would need the experts to weigh in on how do you ensure that there are 2 high schools that will live another 50 years, right?
Mhm. Yep.
So Sean and I are like, all right, so have them tell us to do what? Like, how to keep it going for 50 years? So what is the do what part? Ms.
Well, but if
Blaney?
there's no land, then we're stuck with what we have,
Okay,
right? I mean, if there's no land to actually go build a new,
a new high school.
I mean, if there's no land to build one new high school, there's certainly not gonna be land to build 2. So, right? Does that make sense?
If there's not land to build one new one, the question then is actually, what do we do to the 2 we have now so that they are the quality and the capabilities that they should be for the next 50 years?
And
I think
what-
that's the what.
And that's what,
yeah, that's
yeah,
the
that's what an
question.
expert would
Yeah,
weigh in on.
that's the what.
Given the physical
Not,
constraints of
not
the
one new
property.
high school because there's no land, then what do you recommend we do for the longevity of schooling,
yeah.
right? So that it's the purpose of not just maintaining what we got and wait for something to break down, it's,
The purpose of
To
getting
bring
them
it
to
up
that level,
to-
yes.
and then my second question, just for clarity, so we can inform. If not one high school, then 2. What does that mean for middle school, if it's 2?
I think what we had just talked about was
Yes.
asking them to give us options for continuing with 3 or consolidating to 2.
With the backup plan.
As the
As the
plan,
contingency
as the Plan
plan.
B for 2 high schools.
Plan
So
A is
essentially,
one
what
So
are
that
they
we're
doing?
not
What's
taking
best for
3
the
middle
middle
schools
school?
right off the
So
table.
you're gonna go ahead and plan for both then? So 2 high school, if 2 high schools, then they should flesh out the 2 and 3 options.
Yes,
Okay, right, just,
and leaving
Wanna
the
get it
6
right.
elementary
And
schools.
every option went to 6 elementary schools, although the fleshing out of where and how the 6 elementary schools land changes depending upon the first
Right,
parts of
and
all of
that's
those
for them
questions.
Right.
to do.
can you say that last part again?
The, if not 1, then 2.
Yeah.
Gives us 2 options. If not 1, then 2, and 2 could be 2 or 3. That changes the potential existence of land that could be factored into what do we do with the 6? So 6 is universal across 1, 2A, and 2B.
Got it.
But where those 6 can optimally be located will change depending upon whether it's 1, 2A, or 2B because of what is already available.
In the terms of land?
Yeah.
Okay. Or they could say, we don't need any of your upper school land, we can
Mhm.
swing it and move kids and build and blah, 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 okay,
Yep.
yep. We'll let them figure that out, okay.
And I think for all we know, when we're talking about, when you visualize any of our schools, the 8 elementary now or the 3 middle,
we don't know what's behind there. So in some realm, there could be a high school that the land behind what we see physically from the street, there could be land back, we just don't know. So, you know, there could also be that option. That's why, you know, the experts, like you say, take in consideration all of our footprints right now, and then, you know, beyond what we can see right now, there could be more acreage to do a high school, we just don't know. So, it just, lots of possibilities, I think.
Can you live with what we just talked about? Can you?
I am. I'm comfortable with the version of the contingency that we just put out. I am comfortable with if there's land for one, let's see what it looks like. We still have points in this process where we can arrow back and reevaluate if it doesn't align with our ed specs and our various things and programming options we come up with. All of that is on the line. I think there is value to continuing to keep that option on the table through the process. I think there's also value to keeping the other as well, and I think that's important too. So I appreciate the willingness to keep that in a very solid way as a contingency option. To have both of those be part of the discussion next week with the community, I think is important. And then for both of those to be on the table for consideration for what we actually put out to the RFP. I think having the pieces to all of that will be a more responsible way to approach it than to just take it off the table right now. So I appreciate the flexibility.
Does anybody else have anything they want to add? Is that a thumbs up?
Yep, I'm good with this new plan.
Do we want to formalize it in a motion for a draft?
Sure. Okay, so let me
I guess- Well, I
I
don't know.
think I have it here.
Okay.
So, motion that the Milford Board of Education approve the following long-range planning draft concepts to move forward to a public hearing. And that would be that our primary concept would be to have 1 new high school, 2 middle schools, and 6 elementary schools. And that our contingency plan would be to, if we can't build 1 new high school because the land is there, what do we need to do to our 2 existing high schools to make them sustainable? We also then, as part of the contingency plan, would want them to look at which would be better, 2 or 3 middle schools, and then how we would best configure 6 elementary schools.
Did you get all that?
Watch the video.
There was a lot of stuff in the middle there that.
I was trying to be thorough.
It was accurate.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Is there any further discussion?
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
Did the first part of the statement, did you point out that we need to find the land in there, or that?
I did say that.
You did say that.
I said that as I introduced the contingency
You
plan.
need to say if the land
Yes.
doesn't exist, but she said if
Yes.
the land exists.
If
it was
no
a tiny
land-
Misspeak. Yeah, you heard it
Yes.
too. That was the only.
Thank
Any
you.
other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Smith? We'll do a roll call vote.
Aye.
Yep. We don't have to do a roll call vote if it's unanimous. I read that today.
Oh, cool.
But we'll do a roll call vote anyway.
Megan Doyle,
Yes.
Scott Furmender,
Yes.
Tracy Irby,
Yes.
Tom Koba.
Yes.
Lauren Maller,
Yes.
Christina Preet.
Yes.
Adam Scobie,
Yes.
Mike Smith,
Yes.
Cindy Wolf Boynton,
Yes.
and Susan Glennon.
Yes.
Motion passes
Thank
unanimously.
you, Ms. Griffin. All right, that's good. All right, so thank you everyone for that participation, and I'm glad that we have come to that agreement. So for the next steps, again, we're gonna have a public hearing on May 27th, next Tuesday at 7:30 in Parsons Auditorium, since we will already be there. And we'll have a brief presentation at the beginning, just to explain to the public how we've gotten to where we are, and then we'll have the public hearing. And then we have a special meeting planned for June 2nd to formally adopt the concepts, and then we'll have a discussion about the RFP at that point.
Can I ask a question?
Yep,
Who presents the concepts at the community meeting?
at the, it'll be a combination of administration and, I don't know if I'll have to weigh in or not, but we'll work that out further.
Are the consultants involved
The
still?
consultants, we will not see the consultants again, they have moved on to other items, so the delay in the time. So those are the final two
Mr.
steps.
Smith's raising
Quick
his hand.
question.
Yes, Mr. Smith?
Next Tuesday, is MGAT gonna be able to broadcast that public hearing?
Yes, Griffin is shaking her head, yes.
Great. Thank you.
All right, anything else on the next steps?
No, I just,
Mr.
I had a
Fermenter?
question. How long until we can get the experts to flush out some sort of costs?
I think that will take months, so I don't
Months,
anticipate that
okay.
happening
No, just
until
wanted
the
to
beginning of the first,
get a
yeah,
feeling.
it'll take
Thank you.
months.
They said
Thank you.
they said 9-ish.
Yeah, we have to put out, we have to agree on the RFP, we have to put out the RFP, we have to get the responses, and then choose a individual, a firm,
An architect,
and then they start their work. So we're talking, the next term, I would
Just want to
say.
make sure.
All right,
So just for clarification, are we choosing the consulting, or is Mr. Brennan and?
we will weigh in on that,
Okay.
right? We will weigh in on that, I'm saying that.
Are we choosing the consultants?
Who will be choosing the consultants was the question. The board will
RFP.
weigh in from the RFP. The board will weigh in on the individuals that respond to the RFP.
We don't normally do it, we would have the,
We don't normally engage the board in that decision.
Will that be the
No, I-
permanent building committee?
No, this wouldn't be anything to do with that. I think the board should weigh in on that.
We'd have to do it in executive session.
yeah.
Okay.
it's an executive session.
That's fine.
Okay. We'll have
Um,
to then hold a special meeting.
Well, that'll be later in the summer.
Summer. Sorry?
That'll be later in the summer, once we get the responses. Once we get the responses
So part of the
in.
RFP process would be timeline, so maybe we
Right.
could include that.
Okay, all right. Next on the agenda, we have the minutes from our May 12th meeting that we need to approve so that we can, Mr. Brennan can take them and submit them to the state for the next phase. So we thought we would take advantage of this meeting to do that rather than waiting until the June business meeting.
Motion that the Milford Board of Education approve the May 12th, 2025 business meeting minutes as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Smith, are you okay with the minutes?
He said aye, yeah.
Okay, so that's unanimous.
Yeah.
Do we have anybody in our audience who would like to make public comment this evening? All right. Speakers may offer objective comments about school operations and programs. The board encourages speakers not to express personal complaints or defamatory comments about the Milford Board of Education personnel or any person associated with Milford Public Schools. Security issues and matters relating to negotiations and grievances will not be permitted. Consistent with the principles of the Federal Education Right to Privacy Act, discussion of students is prohibited absent parental waiver. Public comment does not allow for two-way conversation between speakers and the board, but we welcome and appreciate your comments and opinions, and all will be taken into consideration. Please note that our meetings are televised and live streamed on YouTube. We ask that you state your name and address for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, and public comment this evening is limited to agenda items only.
My name is Mary Elizabeth Oak, better known as Emmy, that lives at 30 Drumina Place here in Milford. First of all, I'd like to say to all of you what hard work each of you have done, going into tremendous detail, trying to work a plan, future for the education system, buildings, students, and courses. It's not been easy for you. It's highly complicated. and you've had budget restraints issues put onto you. I've watched for a long time now, not just this year, but last year. I admire what you've gone through. I don't know if I could have been as pleasant as all of you in the throes of it, because there have been times I've wanted to rip things apart, not at you, beyond your control, and my utter disgust of certain decisions that are made, all because of this money. But I think you've made some very good decisions, even last week's meeting, which I wasn't able to be here. I watched it online, and I think you handled it and made the best decisions of where to make the restraints in the coming year with the incredible cut that was given to you. I just wanted to thank every single one of you, and even tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Is, anybody opposed to adjourning at 8:20? Okay, we are adjourned. Adjourned.
Early night.
Adjourned.